Uthman ibn Talha, he says there are three special traits about Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Three special things. لا ينازع فيه لا ينازع في ثلاثة, that he could not be competed with in regards to three things. There were three things that he beats everyone in. Okay? Number one, في شجاعة, in his bravery. Number two, وفي العبادة, and in regards to his worship. And number three, and in his balagha, in regards to his eloquence. So in his shaja'a, in his ibadah, in his balagha, in his bravery, his worship, and his eloquence, that these were three things that you could never beat him with. Okay? And Imam al-Dhahabi, so we start off with al-shaja'a, in particular, his bravery. And Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, قَدْ كَانَ يُضْرَبُ بِشَجَاعَةِ ibn Zubayr al-mathal. He says that the bravery of Ibn Zubayr was used as a basis for many amthal, for many examples. So people would basically say, he has the bravery of Ibn Zubayr, right? Or one day he'll have the bravery of Ibn Zubayr. Al-amthal, the parables and the examples would be made out of the bravery of Ibn Zubayr. So it was well known amongst all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and the tabi'een that this man has serious bravery. And also there's a narration that one time the Prophet ﷺ, he saw him running behind his father, okay? And Ibn Zubayr was playing with the wounds of his father and not disturbed by it whatsoever. And Rasulullah ﷺ looked at him and he doesn't care. This kid holds a sword, he doesn't mind these types of things. So Rasulullah ﷺ says, هَذَا ibn Abi. This is the son of his father. Alright? And that statement is a very famous statement about Ibn Zubayr. هَذَا ibn Abi. This is the son of his father. The next time we see this statement being said is a very, very beautiful incident that takes place between him and Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, because of his size, when he used to walk on the road, the kids used to run away from him. and Imam al-Qurtubi says that the road used to shake when Omar would walk on it. Right? Al-Qurtubi, he even says that Omar has a very intimidating presence. Physically, he's like the Paul Bunyan of that time, subhanAllah. Very intimidating presence because of how huge he is. His sheer size, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He also had a very deep voice. Omar had a booming voice. Al-Qurtubi, he says that one time, Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu went to a barber and the barber never heard him speak. And Omar radiallahu anhu, he just asked him to do something and the barber fainted. Because of the voice of Omar ibn al-Khattab. So even though he wasn't trying to be intimidating, he's a big, huge man. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say about Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu? لو رآك الشيطان تسلك فجا لسلك فجا آخر. If you were to, when you take a path, shaitan is so afraid of you, shaitan goes and takes another path. Alright? So when Umar radiallahu anhu walks on the street, literally all the kids just run away. Okay? So one time, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is walking on the street and all the kids run away and Abdullah ibn Zubayr is just standing there looking at him. And Umar ibn Khattab is shocked, like, who does this kid think he is, right? So Umar radiallahu anhu, he walks up to him and he looks at him and he looks him right in the eye and he says, مَا لَكَ يَا ibn Zubayr. He said, what's wrong with you, O Ibn Zubayr? He says, لَمْ تَفِرْ كَمَا فَرَ الصُّبْيَانِ. You're not running away like the other kids ran away. Why didn't you run away like all the other kids? He's testing him, saying, what's wrong with you, Ya Ibn Zubayr? Why didn't you run away like the other kids ran away? He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, وَلِمَا أَفِرْ. He said, O Commander of the Believers, why should I run away from you? وَلَمْ أَرْتَكِبْ جُرْمًا حَتَّى أَفِرَّ مِنْكَ. And I didn't commit any crime or I didn't do anything wrong that I should be afraid of you, so I don't need to be running away from you because I did something wrong. And he says, وَالطَّرِيقُ لَيْسَ ضَيِّقَ حَتَّى أُوَسِّعُ لَكَ. And he said, this isn't a narrow path that I need to make space for you. There's plenty of room on this path for you to walk and for me to be standing here. So that takes a lot of courage to stand up and say that to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu and not be afraid of him just like, smacking you out of the way. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Ibn Zubayr said that, ضحك, he laughed, right? And he actually picked up Ibn Zubayr and he said, هذا ibn Abi. This is the son of his father, right? That's just like a Zubayr. He acts like a Zubayr, right? He doesn't fear anything. Okay, just like a Zubayr feared absolutely nothing, Abdullah ibn Zubayr feared absolutely nothing. And so, subhanAllah, we find that in the battlefield, some of the most brave incidents we find are from Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, particularly And Imam Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he recounts two incidents. He says the first one was part of his training, that whenever Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, in the battle of Yarmouk, okay, Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was one of the people, in the battle of the Yarmouk, the Muslims were outnumbered by about 130,000 people. It wasn't, they're always outnumbered, but it's usually 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to maybe 20,000, right? We're talking about over 100,000 people on the other side, more than the Muslims here. So the Battle of Yarmouk was a very difficult battle. And Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he saw people getting scared, Az-Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu would walk up to them and he would say, "Bayi'ni hatta al-maut." Give me your allegiance, give me your pledge that you will not stop until you die. And so he, one by one, when he saw them, faltering, he'd get them re-energized once again. And to show them that they had nothing to be afraid of, he picked up Abdullah and he put him on the horse in front of him. And he carried his two swords and he went through the battle with Abdullah in front of him, just fighting with these two swords. Right? And Abdullah ibn Zubayr is just looking around like, where am I? What's going on here? As Zubayr was doing this to show people, like, you have nothing to be afraid of. We have Allah on our side. You don't need to worry about these people. To the point that I'll put my son in front of me and nothing's going to happen to him. Okay, so Abdullah from a very early age, nothing used to really faze him in the battlefield. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that the bravery of Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it showed most in when the Muslims fought in Tunis, okay, where they were only 12,000 versus 86,000. So they're also extremely outnumbered. And on the other side, you had the king whose name was Jurayjir. All right? Now Jurayjir was a very arrogant, he was a Roman, and he was very, very arrogant. And he would actually be leaning back on his throne while the battle was going on, and he would have women that were fanning him during the battle. So he fits the profile of what you'd see in a movie of a pompous king, back then. SubhanAllah, look at the difference between him and the Prophet ﷺ. And Rasulullah ﷺ, when it used to get heavy in the battle, Omar ibn al-Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib said, we used to hide behind the Prophet ﷺ. For most people, they just sat back. So Jurayjid used to have people that were fanning him, and he'd call out bounties on certain people and things of that sort, and he'd call out and say, I'll give a reward to whoever kills that guy and kills that guy, and so on and so forth. He's a very arrogant man. So in this battle in particular, the commander of the Muslim army was Abdullah bin Sa'ad. Abdullah bin Sa'ad, who was placed as the governor of Egypt. This is in the time of Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So while they're standing, Abdullah ibn Zubayr is standing next to Abdullah bin Sa'ad. Jurayjir, he calls out. And he says, Ayyuhal junud, O army, he's calling to himself. He's saying, Man qatala qa'id al-muslimin, Abdullah ibn Sa'ad, whoever kills the leader of the Muslims, Abdullah ibn Sa'ad, فَلَهُ مِنِّي مِئَةُ أَلْفِ dinar, then he'll get 1,000 dinars from me. And we said dinars is a lot of, that's a huge block of gold. He says, وَأُزَوِّجُهُ ibnati, and I will marry him to my daughter. And so just go and bring me Abdullah ibn Sa'ad. He just calls out to them and he makes this announcement, says, just go get me Abdullah ibn Sa'ad and you get all of this. So Abdullah ibn Sa'ad visibly got scared. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he tapped him. And he said to him, La tafza', don't be afraid. Right? Why are you afraid? And he told him, he said, if you want to get him back, he said, بل أؤمر مناديك ينادي من قتل جريجير فله 100,000 دينار وأزوجه ابنتي وأملكه بلاده. He said, call back and make your guy call back and yell to your army that whoever kills Jurayjir, then he'll get 100,000 dinars, and I'll marry him to my daughter and I'll give him his land. Okay? So the munadi, Abdullah ibn Sa'ad, he does that because Abdullah ibn Zubayr told him that. So he calls out and he says, exactly what Abdullah ibn Zubayr said. So then all of a sudden you could see that everyone on the other side got scared. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu was like, we have nothing to be afraid of. He's reinforcing Ibn Sa'ad. Now that battle lasted for days. Some historians say it went up to 2 weeks, where every day they came out and they fought. And eventually, basically, they just get exhausted around the time of Dhuhr. They'd go back. The Muslims would pray Dhuhr. They'd retreat. They'd rest. And then they'd come back and fight the next day. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he came to Abdullah ibn Sa'd and he said, I have an idea. After the battle was just dragging on and on and on and on. He said, I have an idea. He said, divide the army into two. Here's what we'll do. Leave one half of the army in the tents. Let one half fight. And then when the time of Dhuhr comes tomorrow, let the other fresh guys come out and catch them by surprise. And he said, what I will do is, I'll take 30 people, I'm going to go choose 30 men, and we're going to go get Jurayjir. All right? So this is all Abdullah ibn Zubayr's plan. So the next day, the plan works perfectly. All right? They totally don't see it happening. And so the other 6,000 comes out at the time of Dhuhr, and they keep fighting. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he takes 30 men, and he says to them, Ihmu dhahri, watch my back. All right? And he charges by himself all the way through 80,000 people. Subhanallah, he tells these 30 men, you run behind me and just watch my back. And, Imam bin Hajar, rahimahullah, narrates that there wasn't a single person that got in his way except that he moved, and he split the army in two by himself. He was just running in between 80,000 people. Think about how much time that takes until he found himself behind the army and he looked up and Jurayjir was sitting on his throne in front of him. Right? And subhanAllah, he was the one that killed Jurayjir. Okay? Jurayjir just totally didn't see it happening. Now, when that happened, that was a huge, huge, huge victory for the Muslims. Abdullah ibn Zubayr was being lauded with praise and all types of things. Abdullah ibn Sa'd, he said, go back to Medina and tell Uthman radiallahu anhu what happened. Give Uthman the good news, because Uthman apparently was very, very concerned about these people, because it didn't seem like a winnable battle, and it seemed like it was going to be very bad. And so he said, go back to Uthman and tell him what happened. So he sent Abdullah ibn Zubayr all by himself to go to Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. When he got to Uthman to tell him what happened, Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was so happy when he saw him. He said, Is'ad ala manbar Rasulillah. Climb the manbar of the Prophet ﷺ, climb the pulpit of the Prophet ﷺ, وَبَشِّرِ النَّاسَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ, and give the people the glad tidings of the victory that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he stood up, and all of the people of Medina, they gathered, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr talked about the battle, giving all of the details, talking about how they didn't lose trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking about all of these things. And while he's saying it, Uthman radiallahu anhu started to cry, and Uthman radiallahu anhu says, كَأَنَّهُ Abu Bakr. كَأَنَّهُ Abu Bakr. كَأَنَّهُ Abu Bakr. It's like he's Abu Bakr. Because of how eloquent he was, he reminds me of Abu Bakr. It's like he's Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. The way he talks, the way he speaks, the confidence, the eloquence. كَأَنَّهُ Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay, and we also see that when the assassination of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu would take place, his bravery also stands there. All of the Khawarij were afraid of him. You see, the Sahaba, especially the children of the Sahaba, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Al-Hasan, Al-Hussein, they were guarding Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Okay? Abdullah had the front door of Uthman radiallahu anhu's house. And he was the main reason why they couldn't get into the house of Uthman radiallahu anhu for so long, because they were so afraid of him, as he was guarding Uthman radiallahu anhu from the front, Al-Hasan al-Hussein guarding the sides. Abdullah ibn Omar was there for some time as well, guarding Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Some of the other children of the Sahaba, the young men of the Sahaba, were guarding Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And when Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was, when the assassination of Uthman took place, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he suffered 26 wounds. 26 wounds, protecting Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he used to feel that pain for the rest of his life, subhanAllah, from all of the wounds that he suffered. And he used to say, هَذَا لِعُثْمَانَ. This was for Uthman, وَأَرْجُو أَنْ يَكُونَ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ عَمَلِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. He says that this was done for Uthman, and I hope that this is from the best things that I've ever done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Was defending Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, but he never regretted it. SubhanAllah, he stood at the very last minute. Even when Uthman radiallahu anhu, Uthman didn't want anyone to die in his cause. Uthman told the Sahaba, just go home, don't defend me. Right? Go home and don't defend me. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Al-Hasan and Hussein, they refused to leave the house. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he stood there to the very, very, very last minute. And that's one of his distinctions, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, again, is his shaja'ah, his bravery. It's absolutely unparalleled. The second thing was what? We said al-shaja'a. What's the second thing? Al-ibadah, his worship. Mujahid, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, كَانَ إِذَا قَامَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ كَأَنَّهُ عُودٌ. Whenever he used to stand up for prayer, it was like you were looking at a pole. And he said that's how Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught Abu Bakr the salah. Abu Bakr taught Abdullah ibn Zubayr the salah. And the thing about the family of Az-Zubayr that you need to understand is that the family of Az-Zubayr is distinguished by its salah. It's absolutely distinguished by its prayer. There's so many stories and narrations about this household with their salah. And Az-Zubayr, Abdullah, Mus'ab, and Urwa would all die in their salah. And even Asma radiallahu anha, it would appear to be that way as well. It can't be confirmed, but for those, you can actually confirm that they all died in their salah. So this was a family of ibadah, a family of salah. There's a very famous story about his brother Urwa, that Urwa was bit in the foot once and he had venom in his leg. Okay? And they told him to drink alcohol to numb him so that it would be easier when they amputate what they need to, so that they could get rid of it. And he said, no, just cut it off while I'm in Fajr. Right? And this is a very famous narration. So subhanAllah, his leg was actually cut while he was in salah. He said, because I won't feel it if I'm in salah. Right? So I mean, this is a family that distinguishes itself by a salah. Mujahid rahimahullah, he also narrates, Mujahid says that one time, I was sitting at the haram. And he said, I was reading Qur'an. He said, I read Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, An-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah, all while Abdullah ibn Zubayr was in sujood. In one sajda, in one prostration. He didn't get up from one sajda from the time. And you know, Mujahid wasn't reading Alif Lam Mim Dhalika al-Kitab la Rayba. You know, Mujahid is reading Qur'an the way Mujahid reads Qur'an, and he's saying he stayed in his sujood that entire time. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr was known also that when he used to stand in salah, the birds used to come and stand on his head and on his shoulders because of how still he was. He achieved a stillness that was unknown to the Sahaba. No one has ever seen that stillness that he had in his salah. And subhanAllah, this is very beautiful because it shows you the courage and the bravery he was deriving. He was deriving it from his connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said that one time, even in the battlefield, he took it, you have to understand that in the battlefield, they used to have salah, but their salah was the salat al-khawf. Read about salat al-khawf, the prayer in fear. The prayer in fear is largely symbolic. All right, it's largely symbolic that we don't abandon our salah even in times of battle. Essentially, salat al-khawf, to make things, to simplify things, is a fragmented prayer. One group of Sahaba go and they do the qiyam, they stand up. Another group comes and they do that part. The other group comes back and they do ruku'. Then they come back and the other group does ruku', and they keep doing it throughout the battle. So it's largely symbolic that you will not abandon your salah, even if you are in battle. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he used to, think about how much khushu' or how little khushu' you would have in a battle. Right? It's just human nature. You're in the middle of a battle and you're just coming and trying to get your salah over with. Not because you're shopping or not because you're watching a game, because you're in the middle of a battle. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, even when he was in the middle of battle, he said, subhanallah, that whenever he said Allahu Akbar, كَأَنَّهُ فَارَقَ الدُّنْيَا. It was as if he left this world. Every single time he said Allahu Akbar, it was as if he just departed from this world. And that's why we'll find, subhanAllah, even in the time of Al-Hajjaj, at the end of his life, even when his clothes catch fire, he doesn't leave his salah. He gets attacked and his clothes catch fire, and the Sahaba, and not the Sahaba, but the people are walking up to him and putting the fire out. And he's in salah. He's not leaving it. And there are quite a few narrations of this. When it comes to his salah, one of them is actually with his family. That one time while he was praying, he had a son named Hashim, and this narration is from Amr ibn Qais. Amr ibn Qais, he says that one time Abdullah ibn Zubayr was praying, and his son Hashim was sleeping next to him. So a snake came from the ceiling, all right, and it wrapped around the neck of Hashim. So this snake is going to kill his son. So Hashim starts screaming. Abdullah ibn Zubayr's wife, the whole household comes, they start screaming, and they're gathering around him, and they're screaming, Al-Hayy, Al-Hayy, Adrik Hashim. The snake is getting him, get it off of him, and so on and so forth. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr is in his salah. And when he finished his prayer, he says to his wife, he says, what was that? She says, Rahimakallah, may Allah have mercy on you. Your son was dying and you didn't even notice it? And he said, if I noticed it, then I wouldn't have been giving the salah its right upon me. SubhanAllah, meaning if I noticed it, then I wouldn't have been paying attention to my salah the way I should have. So he didn't even notice his son, this whole commotion is going on around him, and SubhanAllah, he's staying in his salah. Okay? And Mujahid rahimahullah, he continues, he says that there wasn't a single ibadah except that Abdullah ibn Zubayr would do it, and he would do acts of worship that no one else was capable of. So one time Mecca flooded. Okay, Mecca flooded. Now you guys know, if even today they have sewage systems that seem to be like they're from 1400 years ago, right? Even today a little bit of rain comes in that area and it just floods, right? So this really flooded. So the Kaaba was empty. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he looked and he saw the Kaaba and he felt bad that no one was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Masjid al-Haram. So he went and he swam in tawaf. He actually did a tawaf swimming all by himself because he didn't want the Kaaba to be abandoned at any point in time, Allah Azza wa Jalla not being worshipped and glorified in the Haram. So Mujahid says there were types of ibadah that he did that no one else could ever do. I mean, when it came to his worship, he surpassed everybody. And there was something that the Prophet ﷺ allowed him to do that, we talked about this with Abdullah ibn Amr al-As. There are certain things the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't allow you to do, and there are certain things that he would allow you to do based upon your own unique abilities. Rasulullah ﷺ would look at a person, he knew a person's situation, and if he saw something about you that you were an exception, Rasulullah ﷺ would make exceptions for people in regards to ibadah. Alright? With Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it's as-sawm al-wisal, which means to fast continuous days without breaking your fast. What that means is, you don't break your fast at Maghrib. You start fasting today and you don't break your fast until 2 days from now. Rasulullah ﷺ didn't, for the most part, naha Nabi ﷺ an dhalik. The Prophet ﷺ forbade that. And if the Prophet ﷺ saw people that were doing wisal, Rasulullah ﷺ would stop them and they would say, but Ya Rasulullah, you do it. The Prophet ﷺ used to do it. And he said, I'm different from you because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He feeds me at night. He provides for me and He feeds me at night. He nourishes me at night. I'm different from you. Right? So he stopped people from doing it. But in the narration of Ibn Abi Mulaika radiallahu anhu, I'm sorry, not Ibn Abi Mulaika, this is from Samura. This is a hadith in At-Tabarani from Samura radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says, نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الوصال وليس بالعزيمة. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited people from al-wisal, which is to fast continuous days, but laysa bil azima means he didn't stress it. Alright, so it was clear, even as the Prophet ﷺ forbade it, that there were just a couple of exceptions. The exception here is Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He used to fast multiple days without breaking his fast. And this is where the narration of Ibn Abi Mulaika comes. Ibn Abi Mulaika radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, كان ابن الزبير يواصل 7 أيام. He said that Ibn Zubayr fasted 7 days non-stop, and that's not the impressive part. He says, وَيُصْبِحُ فِي الْيَوْمِ السَّابِعِ وَهُوَ الْيَثُنَا. And after 7 days, he was still the strongest of us. Like he still looked fine. He wasn't like 7 days and he's dying. Alright? That he fasted for 7 days, no water, no food. وَكَانَ الْيَثُنَا. He was the most upright of us. He was strong, he is still the same person. Okay? Mujahid rahimahullah, he narrates that he even once did it for 15 days. No food, no water. And he said it was in the summer in Mecca. So he had a special ability, to do these things. This was an ibadah that he was known for, right? And you can come up and you can say, well, that's not humanly possible. These types of things, subhanAllah, either it comes in from the angle of being a karama, a miracle of a sahabi, something that Allah gave to a person, or just the strength of this person, right? And his azima in regards to his determination in regards to doing acts of ibadah. So it was his bravery, his eloquence, and his ibadah. These were 3 things again that Ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu had that no one else ever had. One more thing is that Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used Ibn Zubayr, he put him on the council of the people that collected the Qur'an. Okay? Who ran that council? Who was in charge of bringing the Mus'haf? Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu ta'ala anhu, right? So those that were given to Zayd ibn Thabit to assist him were Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith, and Sa'id ibn al-As. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Sa'id ibn al-As, Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith. These were the three people that were there to reinforce what Zayd ibn Thabit was doing, and that shows you his knowledge of the Quran as well, and the distinction that he has in that regard as well. Inshallah ta'ala, now we're going to take a break because from here on out we get to the political part, the history, and so on and so forth. So I want to break here, inshallah ta'ala.